Brought to you by MC22 Studio. This is Piano Lesson, and I'm Dorothy. Welcome. Today, we are going to do a little more work with arpeggiated chords or broken chords. I know we do a lot with that, but it does come up a lot in your music. I will also introduce you to a couple of musical symbols and help you navigate certain hand over hand or cross hand arpeggio sections or segments in the written music that you may encounter. So we're going to start today with a little technique around this exercise. So remember that an arpeggiated chord is just a chord that you're playing one note at a time, usually consecutively in order on the keyboard. So it could be going up or down. It doesn't really matter if the chord is in a root position. And remember, with root, I mean that the name of the chord is the lowest note and it builds up in thirds, like with a C chord. So inversions mean that I'm rearranging the notes of the chord, but the notes of the chord stay the same. So regardless of the way the chord is inverted or in root position, you're playing the notes in order, ascending or descending on that keyboard. All right, so a crosshand arpeggio would be if your left hand is crossing over your right as you're ascending, or if your right hand is crossing over your left as you're descending. So in today's etude, we are using triplets, and we have two sets of arpeggiated chords. We have two arpeggiated chords, a crossover, and then a blocked chord of one that we played as an arpeggio. So let's take a look at the first measure, and this is just, again, like most of our technique exercises, it's a pattern exercise. So while you are seeing this music written out, you as well, once you get the hang of it, can play this memorized, and it's still effective in working on your technique. So we're starting in a C position, which means C is the lowest note in both hands. We're starting with a C chord, so it's just C, E, G. Remember that with a triplet, we are playing 3/8 notes in one beat. And this is different than what we normally would play as a pair of eighth notes in one beat. And you can note that it's a triplet by the 3 in brackets right at the beam. Okay, so I'm playing my C chord, my left hand, and if you'll note, we can see that it says LH, left hand over with finger 2 for my third count. My right hand hasn't moved, but I'm going to come in on count 4 as a blocked chord. My left hand's coming back down, and now we're just going to step up. So in this exercise, rather than going up in half steps, so every chromatic step, we're just going to the next letter name. So in this case, D. Now my left hand goes over to D, right hand comes in on my blocked D chord. Now, it's important, if you are still working on your counting, which you always should be, when you're getting to the quarter notes, make sure you're still counting that triplet, triplet to make sure you're holding those quarter notes long enough. So triplet, 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 triplet. Now I'm down to E, coming back down. Notice that my left hand moves while my right hand plays so that you can be where you need to be on time. Up to F. Now I'm coming back down to G. Over to G. My right hand doesn't move. Back down to B. And here I am at middle C. So my left hand has come up into my treble clef. This last one has been a turnaround, so it's a C. Now to descend, I'm going to show you another symbol here. It's possible we touched on this a while back, but it's going to come up a couple of times today, so let's talk about it again. An ottava is an 8 VA. So when you see this symbol, it means you are either going to be an octave higher or lower than what's written in your music. So the written notes for this are treble E, C, E, C, A, sorry. When the ottava is above the notes, then you're an octave higher than what's written. When it's below the notes, then you are an octave lower, and we'll have an example of that later in the program. So once I've landed on this high C, my right hand is coming up an octave higher at high E, and I'm descending with E, E, A, or E, C, A, and then my right hand goes over to my E. And then I come back in on my left hand, with my left hand on my A chord that I just played as a broken chord. I spot, I played E, so now I'm playing D, step down to D, D, now I'm at C, over to C, back over to B, note I'm just stepping down, now I'm at G, stepping down to G. Now before I finish out, I hope you're noticing that the hand that doesn't have to move, I'm kind of using that as my anchor. So I know I just played this, so I'm stepping everything down. So in case you get a little bit disoriented in the whole thing, just note that there are fixed points in this that aren't always moving. Like my left hand when we're doing this descent isn't moving very much. So if I know that I was at my B and my right hand is playing that same chord, I know that I'm stepping down for the next one, just one step. And so my right hand would do the same thing. So now I am 2 measures from the end at F, 3 over to G, which is a ledger into the bass clef. And since I'm still actually playing my left hand in the treble clef, I will actually be playing a middle C for my last chord. C, left hand over. Okay, I know that could be a little confusing, so hopefully you're able to play the video over a couple of times if you're trying to get that down. Again, it's a pattern, so I'm starting in C position, and I'm just stepping up to each new white key. I'm not worried about any sharps or flats, so I'm not worried about any of the black keys right now. And you go over to the tonic above. So if I'm playing C chord, I'm actually going to a C. When I'm descending, even though I'm starting with an E, I'm still going down to an E for the arpeggio rather than what would be the root of that chord. So E, D, D, and so on and so forth. Okay, so those are crosshand arpeggios. And the LH, RH, when you see that in your music, right hand over, that's what they refer to. So wherever your left hand is, you see that right hand right over a particular note, that's an indication to play that note with your right hand, whether it be in the bass clef or the treble clef. So we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you a couple of symbols that would indicate to you to use an arpeggiated chord without drawing out the arpeggiation. Is that a word? The arpeggio. Or you can, and you can, I'll show you how to navigate a section in a piano piece where your left hand and right hand are kind of intermingled in an hand-over-hand situation. So we'll be right back, and we'll take a look at that together. Welcome back. Okay, so before the break, I talked about how we were going to look at a symbol that would ask us to use an arpeggiated chord. And this is the symbol. It's just this little squiggly line that runs along the whole blocked chord. I have, in this case, 2 E major chords. So just E, G sharp, B, E, G sharp, B. So if without that symbol, I would just play the blocked chord, but with the arpeggiated symbol, what that is telling me is to play each note up from the bottom. So I'm rolling into that chord. Sometimes people will refer to it as a rolled chord. I have one in the next line even that keeps that same E major chord and inverts the next E chord. So again, just because you've inverted the chord doesn't mean that you wouldn't still play it the same way. So here would be the root position and with the first inversion. So whenever you see that in your music, you know that you have to play that note, that chord as an arpeggio. Does it matter if you play it super fast? I would say no, especially not in the beginning. If you're uncomfortable with playing it and playing it nice and even, I would say the slower the better. This way you can learn to build your control before you work on speed, which is always, always, always a good strategy if you want to get better and faster and efficient and play with control. The other variation on this arpeggiated chord would be when you have this same squiggly symbol, and I'm pointing to it on my paper right now, but it's the same squiggly symbol, but there's actually an arrow pointing down. And what that actually means then is rather than building from the bottom up, which we do normally in our music, we're coming from the top down to the bottom. As you can tell, I'm not as comfortable doing that. It's a very different sound. Okay, so those are your rolled chords or your arpeggiated chords. The other thing I'd like to go over with you is how in the world do we read cross-hand arpeggios in our music? How do I interpret all of the symbols and know which hand to use and when? Because it can be a little confusing. There's a lot going on. I highlighted a segment. It's the last 4 measures in this song here. And we have a lot happening. There is an a tempo marking, which from way back means that we're going back to an original tempo. So we probably came from a ritardando earlier on, which means to slow way down. We also have some dynamic markings in the middle. I have an octave symbol, an ottava beneath the notes. So again, remember when it's underneath, we're going lower than what's written in the music. And then I have some cross-hand arpeggios moving through 2 measures where I have LH, RH, but it's not completely clear which hand plays which. So I'm going to show you what to look for. Okay, so when we start this measure, we're starting with, let's just start with the notes themselves, not the other chords around them first. I'm starting with G, a low G, and there's an ottava beneath it. And the bracket just sits right underneath that 1 count. So rather than this G, I'm taking it all the way down to this G. Then I'm going to hop up to the G loco, is what they will call it when you're playing it just as written. I'm coming from that ottava up to low G, and that's my left hand. Now, one of the things to look for is when you have right hand, left hand alternating, interspersed in a few measures, we're also going to use stem direction, like the direction of the stems will be different to help differentiate. So I have been playing this bass line with my left hand, so we're still assuming that's left hand. My right hand comes in on bass G, which is just below middle C, but still in my bass clef. But when you cross over into the next measure, I see that I have a single D, right? But there's a 5 above it, and the stem's pointing up, just like the first two, the G and the B, in the measure before. So I know that's all still my right hand. My left hand there's an LH written right under the very next 8th note, which is the treble G, which is treble clef, which usually my right hand plays, right? But the stem's pointing down, and there's an LH. So I know that that's my left hand coming in here, and for the next 3 notes, as they're all stems down, doing the same thing. So I'm coming in on G, playing my G chord. Okay, so now my right hand's coming out as my left hand plays, and my very last arpeggio here has an ottava above. So if I'm playing that as written, I would be playing exactly the same notes that I just played with my left hand, right? But because of that symbol, I'm going an octave higher to play G, E, or G, B, and then D. Okay, so disregarding the 2 notes above it, I'm just looking at the single note line. I'm starting here 4 measures from the end again with my low G, coming to, okay, so extra low G coming into my low G, bass, treble, high. Now, you're looking at it and saying, I see 2 more notes above that, and you're correct. So, still with the ottava, because it's underneath that, we would be playing a high G and B, which would normally be right here, but I'll be up here with my left hand. So my right hand and left are playing at the same time for that last chord. Notice that the stems are pointing in opposite directions, so that is like another little visual. Those are 2 separate parts. All right, I'm going to put the whole thing together because I come in on count 1 with a chord in my treble and one in my left. Left hand over, right hand over, left hand over to land on 1, and then my left hand goes all the way back down to that lowest G again. Okay, it might still seem a little confusing to you, but hopefully you watch that again a couple more times with me. All right, again, starting extra low G, coming to as written, G, right hand comes to my bass G, treble D, left hand comes to the treble G now. Right hand comes out 1 octave higher. G and B and D all come in at the same time. Okay, and that's how you would go about taking a look at one of these sections and piecing it out. Welcome back. Okay, we are going to play The Harp by Ludwig Schutte. I looked up the last name because this one I wasn't quite sure on how to say, but because it doesn't look anything like that, but Schutte. All right, so this is another arpeggiated song, and I thought we could use it as another chance for you to get some practice in with technique, because again, it's a lot of the songs that you're going to play are going to use broken chords, and the better you get at playing them and recognizing them and breaking them down in a piece, the better. Okay, so when I sit down to look at a new song, I look at the very beginning. This part right here tells me a lot. I see that I'm in 6/8 time, which means that An eighth note is the unit of note that gets one count. Because of the 6 on the top, I know that this could almost even be thought of as 2 groups of 3/8. Although with the type of phrasing and the fact that it's called the harp, I might be thinking about more connected phrasing and not so much worried about feeling multiple pulses in the song. I do have a phrase over from the beginning of the measure to the end, so I know that I am playing nice and smooth instead of detached. I am playing connected. Okay, so also what I'm seeing is I have a pedal line underneath, and this is my connective pedaling. We'll talk about that at the very end. The next step I'm going to take with the song then is I'm going to block the chords. So if you remember from Color My World, when we block chords, we're literally taking the notes that are played as a broken chord and playing them all together so that we can kind of get a map of where we are with the piano, where your hands have to go. It can sometimes organize it a little more so that you're not looking at this page and just seeing like non-stop notes. You can see like more relationships between them. So I'm starting with A. Oh, and that's another thing I can tell from the beginning. What key am I in? I don't see any sharps or flats in my key signature, so that could tell me I'm either in C major or A minor. So a major sounding key is going to sound happy. Minor keys sound a little bit darker, a little sad. Also at the end of the song, if it's a major key, it's going to end in C. If it's a C major, it will end with C. So the notes of my C chord are C, E, and G. The notes of my A minor chord are A, C, and E. So if I look at the end, I'm playing an A, a C, and then another A. So I don't have any A's in my C chord, so I must be in A minor, okay? With a couple of G sharps thrown in there, because when we play a minor scale, a lot of times we use that harmonic minor because it raises the 7th, which creates a half step that brings you back to your home note or tonic. So that would be, again, A in this case. All right, so I'm starting with an A chord and then another A chord in my right hand. So we're doubling here. In the next measure, I can see that I still have A on the bottom, but now I'm playing D and F, both in my left and right hand. So that would actually be my 4 chord in the A minor scale. So I'm going from A to my D chord in 2nd inversion. From there, I step the lower note down to G, and I'm playing a G, B, D. And then I go to keeping the G on the bottom, but I step to E or C and E in both hands above. So that would be a C chord, which is actually the 4 chord of your G major. From there, it looks like I am at the bottom of my chord, stepping down to an F, A, C, and I'm doing the same in treble clef. The next chord is a little bit different inversion, still F on the bottom and A, but it's a D on top, so that tells me that's a D minor again in 1st inversion. And then we step down once again to an E major, E, G sharp, B, and then E, A, C. So from the beginning, once again, through measure 8, I have A chord, D minor, G, C, F, D minor, E major, A minor. See how we landed back in A? Okay, so that might help me kind of see, okay, this is where I'm going. I stay with that A position, and I'm just stepping down as I go. When I start back at measure 9, right away I notice I have A chord to start. I have that same progression so far, G again, C again. I notice that it's another F. This next chord's different though, so I play my F, and then the lower note goes down a step, even though A and C still stay the same. So this time I'm already back to my A minor. Ooh, then I come into my E major before landing at my home chord again. So the first half of the second half, so the third line, is just exactly like my first line. And by blocking my chords, I can see that right away. I can kind of, by simplifying it, I can make it make more sense from that angle. So once I've blocked that chord, then I can go through and play. If you'd like to practice by adding your block or adding your pedal for continued pedaling, you can play that with your blocked chords, because as you can see, the up-down action of that pedal lands with every first note of every measure. And rather than having to worry about that with your broken chords, you can practice that with blocked. So I'm starting with A. I go to my next chord first. As I'm coming in, my foot lifts and comes back down. Foot comes up and back down. Foot comes up and back down. Notice I'm moving in between. Foot comes up and back down. Foot comes up and back down. If it's too much to use both hands, I always recommend, most of the time it really follows along with the bass line. So if you want to play just your left hand alone with that change in the chord, and you can just always build from there. Once you've got those two things down, add another thing, kind of like juggling, you know? All right, so the finished product then would add your pedal,